During the late 1960s, California Rural Legal Assistance, or CRLA, was established to respond to the growing and unaddressed legal needs of the rural poor migrant community. CRLA was born during Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society era in August 1966. As a part of the War on Poverty programs, CRLA was a subsidiary of the Office of Economic Opportunity and was the first statewide legal service to serve rural areas. CRLA was founded with the goal of protecting the marginalized and disadvantaged workers of California against the strong interests of agribusiness and political interests on the local, state, and federal level as well. Right, CRLA intended to offer its indigent clients the same economic, political, and social bargaining power that large private firms offered their more affluent clients. Our perspective was that the problems of the poor result far less from unjust rules than from the inequitable distribution of wealth and power. We viewed ourselves as an organization trying to change established political, economic, and social systems on behalf of our clients, but always according to the system's own rules. We knew that if CRLA gained the reputation of a highly professional and successful litigation group, that reputation would translate into leverage on behalf of our clients. CRLA sought to actively reverse the effect of poverty through institutionalized legal means. By equalizing the legal field, people who had formerly been excluded from the privileges of protection from the court could now be represented by fully competent and ideologically motivated lawyers. These lawyers not only sought to succeed in court, but wished to have the successes in court translate to a deeper social change as well. By conforming to the structure of the present system currently in place, CRLA was able to maintain its presence within the government as a functioning organization. Rather than attempting to undermine the system entirely, CRLA sought to use the system to gain immediate improvements for the people in need. CRLA was able to empower the rural poor not only legally, but socially and politically as well. Cruz Reynoso, Pomona College graduate of the class of '53, was an early member of the CRLA. He would later become the first Latino judge appointed to the California Court of Appeals, and later the first Latino justice on the California Supreme Court. The story of Reynoso's life shows that CRLA was able to enact immediate change on the social level for the rural poor, but was also able to serve as a springboard for its members to take positions of power in the very institutions it sought to improve. By not only challenging the status quo of the legal system, but also placing members inside the institution itself to reform it, CRLA was able to create change from both the inside and outside. CRLA would face numerous attacks, yet the ideological and structural foundation it built in its creation would allow it to survive such attacks. The most powerful and public attacks came from then California Governor Ronald Reagan and then California Senator George Murphy. The primary argument against CRLA was that it created contradictions within the government. If CRLA sued a government agency, which it would multiple times, the government would in effect be suing itself. Reagan and Murphy both portrayed CRLA as an institution aimed at attacking the government, and both also objected to the use of federal money to carry out such attacks. Not only did the two politicians argue that the costs in maintaining the work of CRLA to be excessive, but they also argued that it was not within the powers of Congress to allow such an organization to be created in the first place. Murphy accused CRLA as being supporters of the farm unionization cause of Cesar Chavez and the UFW. He states, CRLA has turned what was a good and worthy proposal intended to help the poor into what seems to be an extension of the extremely long organizing arm of the farm unionization cause. Murphy simply assumes that both the farm unionization movement and CRLA were against the government simply because they provided a voice for the poor whose interests were often in conflict with the agribusiness-influenced government. Murphy would introduce an amendment named after himself, which would have dismantled CRLA and any organization similar to it, but this amendment would ultimately not pass state legislature. The Reagan administration was against the CRLA because it stood as a government agency on behalf of the poor people. He says, if the poor really needed legal help, they should get it through private organizations such as the ACLU or the NAACP. If federal funds are used, the money should be channeled to private attorneys in private practice who would take the legal cases to the poor. Reagan's antagonism towards CRLA can be explained by the difficulties they presented by blocking his political agenda, such as his proposed measure to cut the state Medi-Cal program, on which many migrant workers relied. In effect, Reagan's fierce opposition to CRLA was a confirmation that the government did not provide for the needs of the poor and was merely concerned with the wishes of the tax-paying and voting constituents. CRLA responded in a letter to President Johnson. We feel that these attacks are highly improper, constituting attempted political interference with the legal representation of indigent persons. To contend that these legal issues cannot even be brought forth is to attempt to cut off any recourse to the legal system which the poor now have through CRLA, and is to encourage them to resort to other non-legal means. CRLA founder James Lawrence also contended, "If we tell men and women without money that we will help them, but only in non-controversial cases and cases which do not challenge government agencies or growers with political influence, then we might as well quit. If we were to consistently refuse to take cases of merit on behalf of poor clients, because they might result in controversy, our clients would know that they are not receiving representation equal to that enjoyed by people who can afford to hire lawyers." By emphasizing the present social inequality, the need for CRLA is justified. By defying the government, CRLA proves itself to be an unbiased and committed agency that is unafraid of doing the work that would otherwise remain unfinished or unattended to. In its willingness to sue the government, CRLA confirms itself as a worthy voice for the rural poor. CRLA also is able to point out that Reagan and Murphy did not oppose CRLA on grounds of political ideology and principle, but were swayed by a white, wealthy elite whose interests were at stake with the empowerment of the rural poor community. CRLA emerged victorious from its public political struggles during its formative years, but these struggles ultimately cemented its status as an organization that would always stay true to the people and would refuse to back down to higher authority while maintaining the ethical codes of law.